everyone, I'm Julie Cefalu, and today we're going to slow the pace down a little bit and we're going to do some hand quilting on our binding. So let's start with some of the tools that I'm going to be using today for hand stitching my binding down. I love the Clover desktop needle threader. It makes it so nice, especially when you start losing your eyesight a little bit as you get older. Great to thread the needles with. And the needles that I like to use are by Gina Kimball, and these are straw needles size 10. They look like this, and they have a little bit of flex to them, so it's nice to get in and out of the quilt sandwich with these needles. I also like to use Thread Heaven thread conditioner, and it's great to run along your thread and it keeps it from tangling. And I like to use these little office supply rubber tips on my fingers, and I'll show you how I use that in a little bit. And these little binding clips, or their Clover Wonder clips, are awesome for holding that binding in place. And then my thread, usually the color of my thread matches my binding. This is a cotton thread by Metler. It's 50 weight, and it works great. So we have to start by threading our needle, and I'm going to show you how this little gadget works. First of all, my needle goes into a little hole here, and it's all labeled on here. It says needle slot, and you want to make sure the eye of the needle is down. So I'm going to plop that right in the hole, and then I'm going to put my thread right here in this little slot, so it just slides right in there. Push down on that button, bring my needle up, and there it is. It threads it. And these eyes, the eye on this needle is really small, so it does a great job of threading the needle for you. Now I'm going to condition my thread with the Thread Heaven, and it basically is wax, and I take my thread and I run it across the top of the wax, and I'll do that a couple of times, just like that. One more time. Okay. I'm going to show you how to make a quilter's knot. This is a great little trick to have in your tool bag. So I want a little knot down here on the tail of my thread. So I'm going to take that thread tail and my needle, and I'm forming a loop here. And the thread tail is going to go in between my finger and the needle. I'm going to just hold that in place, and then I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle about 3 times. And then I'm going to pinch that with my fingers and pull that needle all the way through. And you're going to end up with a nice little knot down here at the end. This is almost like making a French knot in embroidery stitches. So again, let me just show you one more time. Take the tail, put it in between the needle and your finger, wrap that thread around it about 3 times, pinch it and pull the needle all the way through, hold on to that tail, and there's your nice little knot on the end. So here's the back side of my quilt, and I'm stitching up into this corner, and I'm using my Clover Wonder clips to hold my binding in place, and they're fantastic for this. It really keeps you from getting poked so much. So I'm going to take my thread, and I'm going to start, I'll pull this out too, by coming into the quilt sandwich right in between these layers here. And I want to come up on the other side of my stitching, or right on my stitching, that'll do. Okay, and that's where my thread tail is going to get buried, right in there. Bring this around. So now I'm going to take a stitch into the backing fabric, and I'm going to come up. And if I go down into the batting, that's fine too. You just don't want to go all the way through to the other side. So my stitches are about 1/4 of an inch long, and I'm going to come up into the fold of the binding. I'm just going to catch a few threads of that folded edge of the binding. and there's my first stitch. So right where I came out on the binding, I'm going to go down into the backing fabric. So right here I'm going to take another stitch, and I'm going to come up at an angle right into the fold of the binding. Now if I take my stitch and I come too far out here, you're going to see that thread travel from here to here. So to keep your stitches really invisible, you want to stay as close to this folded edge as possible. And same thing when I'm coming up. If I come up too far into my binding, you're going to see that thread travel from where it came up into the binding over to the edge and off the side. So stay close to that folded edge right there. All right, I'm almost to the corner, so I'm gonna take another stitch right up, well, maybe another 2 stitches, let's see. Okay, I'm going to take another stitch right up to the corner into that fold, and I want to stitch into that corner, so let me pull that pin out. And we'll take a couple stitches in here, and I'm doing basically the same thing. I'm just taking a stitch into the binding now and going into the folded side of the binding. Okay, we'll do one more stitch, ought to do it. Okay, once I get up here, I'm going to travel with my needle, so I'm just going to bring my needle down into the binding, and I'm going to pop up out here at that corner again. There I am. Okay, now I can turn it and I can start working on the next side. All right, now we're going to end this. I want to just show you how I would end my stitching. So I've come up through the binding right here, and I'm going to take a stitch out into the backing fabric. This time I'm going to travel away from my binding, so I'm going to come right out here and take my stitch, and now I'm going to make a knot real close to the fabric here, the backing fabric. So I just loop my thread and bring my needle up, and then I hold it down here right at the base of the thread so that I can get my knot to come right down there at the fabric, at the backing fabric. Do it again, take another loop and make a knot. So I've got a nice little double knot there. Now I'm going to take one stitch. I'm going to try and get as close to that hole that the knot is at as possible. I'm just going to take another little stitch, and I'm going to pop that knot into the backing, and if I just pull it hard enough, it should pop right through. And now I can cut my thread tail right here, and then you won't be able to see it. So if you've got some time on your hands and you want to finish that quilt, get it ready for the competition, relax and watch some TV and hand stitch that binding down.